start up Football in Focus, Shane's Rib Shack, for another Thursday night. Getting set for some more football this week. We got the high school level, most important. Got a few college games we'll talk about later on, and maybe talk about some of the pro factors too that are going on these days. So much happening in the NFL that you could probably talk for that for about a week and never really make much headway. Most important thing, though, talking about the Western Guilford football team. We got a big game tomorrow night, taking on Southwest Guilford, and even the game within the game, bigger than the game tomorrow. They're naming the stadium after Doug Henderson, longtime football coach there. Doug Henderson Stadium on Friday night. You've got the Jamison Stadium, Kirby Stadium, you've got C.K. Siler Stadium, Tommy Grayson Stadium, and I think this Western Guilford Stadium, when they get it all settled over the years, you'll probably remember this one not just as Henderson Stadium, but Doug Henderson Stadium. That's how important Doug Henderson was to the Western Guilford community, a definite community leader, and a man who made a big impact on that community this time at Western Guilford, coaching the team and just being an overall leader. His son, Doug Jr., with us tonight, and Doug Jr., like I say, I think when it's all said and done, I mean, we talk about Jamison Stadium, we don't usually say Bob. I think we'll say Doug Henderson Stadium just because of the impact he had as an individual person, not only with that football team, but everybody in the community knew him.
They did, Andy, yes, and it's amazing the outpouring of people who had come forward when all this was going on, just telling me what my father meant to them, all the young men who use his teachings to this day and, whatever careers they've chosen. And he is, certainly Doug Henderson is the name most synonymous with the Western Guilford football program. So I think you're right, that is a good to have both names associated with the stadium.
It was kind of interesting how this kind of came about last year too. They had Coach Eddie Joe Robinson's name came up in regards to the stadium and the history of the football at Guilford High School, Western Guilford, and they wanted to do something for him, so they came up with the idea maybe to name the stadium after him. They also said, well, Coach Henderson had such an impact with Western Guilford, more Western Guilford proper, maybe Coach Robinson more toward the Guilford High School days, so they came up with the idea to go with Joe Robinson Field and Doug Henderson Stadium. And if they wouldn't have come up with Doug Henderson Stadium, they would have left him out. It would have been a big void there. I think he had to be included after winning that state championship. 100-plus wins at Western Guilford, outstanding percentage of a wins-loss record, and for his career, 200-plus wins. Outstanding the job he did.
Yes, and NCHSAA Hall of Fame member to boot, over 200 wins in football, an incredible track record.
The track thing's what blows you away. You almost forget about track, because track was almost like track team did very well, but it's almost like second nature. Sometimes the guys ran track to improve for their other sports, but the job he did with track, I mean, he just kind of went about his business. He was smart, though, because even football carried a track. He knew how to put the right people in the right places.
Exactly, both in football and track. That dual meet record, as you mentioned, absolutely incredible. I think like 180-5 in dual meets. That's probably wrong, but it's something very close to that. 40 win streaks, too. 40 track meet plus win streaks back to back or somewhere in that range. Right. I mean, you win 40 in a row in track. That's pretty big. Well, certainly.
Because you got tri-meets. I mean, it's harder to win sometimes those in a football or a basketball game. You got one-on-one, but in track sometimes you got 3 teams, maybe 4 teams, and to win those outright over 40-plus twice, it's pretty darn big.
Yes, his philosophy in track was you can certainly have good athletes doing certain events, the 100, the long jump, but scoring points in everything, the 2-mile, the discus, the shot put, the pole vault, finding kids who could contribute and score for the team. I think that's what made him an overall very successful track coach.
Probably pretty smart putting those relay teams together too back in the day. Know how to put those relay, because he was such a team man, so much team oriented. He didn't believe in the individual guy carrying the load or even getting the credit. He believed in the team getting the credit. So with those relay teams, and those points add up pretty quickly too.
They do. Your mile relay, your 800, your 4x100. I mean, all those things you say, Andy, add up. And he found each participant, each athlete on the team, a niche, and gave them ownership to where they could contribute and feel good about themselves.
Big thing for him had to be too. I remember seeing him back in his early days in the Guilford College community. My big question to you is this: he was a great coach, put people in the right positions, and in that regard, how did he get all those people in that beige Volkswagen? You got Doug Henderson Jr., you got Chuck, you got Rob, you got I think the mother Doris. Is that right?
That's correct.
And Doug driving. You got he had to be pretty smart to get those people positioned in that car.
Lots of control. He wielded behind the wheel there. I guess this is in the advent before car seats. We were all smaller, so you'd be amazed what you could fit in a '69 beige Volkswagen.
I think that car probably stands out as much as Doug Henderson does back in that old community, because I mean that was a nice car, fairly new, like you say, '69, whatever. Back in the '70s, that's still fairly new. But he took care of business. You saw the car coming. There was more than just that car coming up that hill behind that school. You knew what was, like you said, behind that wheel. You knew the controls that were operating that car. And when the man got out, it was time to get to work.
Well, exactly. You hit the nail on the head, Andy. I mean, I've heard from several former players. They say it wasn't paved back then. That parking lot was gravel. When you heard those Volkswagen tires on the gravel, you knew it was time to buckle up and go to work, because that's what he was there to do.
What are some of your earliest memories of being around your dad, going to some of those games and being around those events, going back when you were a young kid? What are some of the early memories you might have?
Wow, what an education. I mean, we were blessed, my brothers Chuck, Rob, and I, to be essentially gym rats with him. That was our babysitting during the summer. I mean, you know, the summer months, he's prepping for the season. We'd go up there with him. He'd take us there in the morning, you know, have lunch with him. We got to play around with all the guys on the team, you know, just watching the practice, watching the interactions with the players. I wouldn't trade that for anything. I mean, for a young man to see all that, and, you know, that was your dad's passion, his livelihood, very meaningful.
And you think about it, I think you mentioned some events with the State Association of High Schools. He was recently inducted, I think, in Kenan Stadium in Chapel Hill to one of the Hall of Fames. And to be able to go to those events and see your dad be recognized like that, because it happened more than once, that had to be pretty big too.
Very humbling, yes, sir. That was I guess that they inducted him in the spring of 2013. The ceremony was in the 2012 season, and they did call him and the other inductees out at halftime at Kenan Stadium. To see your father recognized, his list of accolades read off in front of 65,000 people, very meaningful to me and my brothers and my mother as well.
Had to mean a lot to him too to have that take place at Kenan Stadium, being a Carolina man. Don't know everything about his college days, but he was a Carolina grad from what I understand, and I think he was a very diehard. I remember seeing him one time back in the 70s. I mean, he knew all those guys. Bill Dooley rubbed elbows with those guys. They were just like best friends. So he comes out of Carolina. That had to mean a lot to him to be recognized on all those people back at a place where he cut his teeth, I guess you'd say.
Well, sir, he's a Rams Club member, tried and true, dyed in the wool. I mean, he maintained contact with all the coaches there, as you mentioned. Bill Dooley, Dick Crum recruited some of his athletes, as did Mac Brown. He was good friends with Carl Torbush. He's good friends with Larry Fedora to this day. So he's very well known down there. To agree with what you said, he played football, believe it or not, at Carolina in the late 50s, and also ran track. So yeah, that's in his blood. It's in our bloodstream. I mean, that's where all of us boys went to school, and
wow, we're just so a Carolina family.
Exactly.
Unreal.
Yes.
Unreal. That's great.
A Carolina family.
What kind of emphasis was placed on winning, even inside the Henderson household back in those days? Because winning was important to him, but there were more things than just winning going on. But how important was it? Because sometimes when you win, you do more than just chalk up a victory. There's more involved in winning than just going out and getting the win and walking around talking about how you just beat somebody, defeated somebody. There's more to it than that. So what kind of emphasis was placed on being the best or working toward that direction in your household?
Certainly every coach wants to win every game and be undefeated. I mean, that's there in, you know, a perfect world scenario. He knew obviously that wasn't going to happen. What he wanted to do was have his teams compete week in, week out, give their best, give each kid meaning and identity on the team. He told every kid there would never be a cut, but I will find a place for you if you give it your all.
Yeah, I read somewhere something about a phrase he had, or somebody had, no cuts, no guts, something like that, you know?
Yeah. Exactly, and that, you know, there, you know, Art Schofield, you mentioned him to me before we went on air. He has a very eloquent, very touching story. He could tell it way better than I could, but there was this certain young man who was, you know, not getting along at home, getting into trouble at school, and he went out for football, I think at the urging of his father. He tried out for the Western team. My dad took him and accepted him, found a place for him, and he told one of the seniors, a very important player, I mean, obviously I don't know the name, this was a long time ago, but he told those seniors to walk up to these young kids in school, find them, single them out, tell them they're doing a great job, they're contributing to the team, they're helping us win. And this senior did this in front of this young man, in front of a big crowd at school, in front of lots of popular people, lots of girls. He tapped him on the shoulder and said, you know, hey, Jeff, that's not his name, but just for an example, we're getting better because of you. Thank you for helping us in practice. I like what you're doing out there. Patted him on the shoulder, walked away. The young man told his father when relaying this story that every eye was on me at that point, and I, you know, you couldn't have kept my head off the ceiling. It was just amazing the impact that senior's words had, and that came down from my dad. So every young man on the Black Hat squad was made to feel important, made to feel meaningful, made to feel like a contributor.
Yeah, I can almost see him back from some of the visuals of him back in the early days. He liked to, his position of approach was not always like standing or what. So he liked to kind of squat down and kind of get that lower position and kind of sit there and study. The man was always a man. When you saw the guy looking around, you knew something was working inside that man's head. He had ideas always churning. You saw him on the sidelines, that little squat position.
Yeah,
that's how he operated.
We were blessed, certainly, as we were younger boys, to be managers, ball boys on that team. I think I spent more time watching him than paying attention to my ball boy duties. But you're right, like the kneeling, being very analytical, wheels always turning, making changes on the fly. That's what good coaching's all about, and he certainly brought that each and every Friday night.
And it's not like Western Guilford wasn't lucky to keep him, because I'm sure from what I heard, he had several college offers over the years. College coaches knew the type of talent he was producing and the kind of job he was doing. They're looking at him going, we might have this guy on our staff.
Well, certainly the type of talent he produced, but just the intangibles he brought, each day, the organization, the team, just the practice planning, having everything planned out to the second, to the minute, no second wasted. I think your top tier college coaches saw that and picked up on it, and like you mentioned, certainly reached out to him and wanted him for their staff.
And with him, it was kind of like when you reported for practice, you reported for a job. You were working in a way for him, plus working for yourself too. Remember some of his details from years ago. He had this black line out by the back door that had the black. When you crossed that black line, it was 3:45 p.m. You went to work at that time. That's when you went to work, and you crossed back. You ran when you crossed that line. You didn't stop working while you're on the field. Then you come back at the end of the day. I think it was about 5. He said, "We're going to do this in 90 minutes. We can't get this done in 90 minutes. We're wasting our time being out here." So you go out and you work about 90 minutes, 5:15. Practice is about over. Do your final warm downs, whatever, your exercises, running the close out of your practice, and you run back. You don't leave the field. You don't walk off, carry your helmet, and go back to the gym or the dressing room. You run back to that black line. That's where you stop. It was like a job, but he taught you so much responsibility in doing that.
Yeah, you're right, Andy. I mean, every detail planned out, every second, every minute. Yeah, it's funny, you said black line, 3:45. Actually, practice was at 3:45. Black line was 3:44.5.
Gotcha.
Figuring you had 30 seconds to get down to the field from the black line.
That's true.
To join in the pre-stretching and what he called the box routine at 3:45.
Right. That's good stuff, because that's that's the way he operated. Like I said, it was a job, but I told somebody, maybe you or somebody else, I was talking to Mr. Schoolfield, somebody. I said, the thing about Coach Henderson was he demanded so much out of you as an individual, but then the thing was, once he demanded that, you found out, hey, I want to get a little bit more on myself what he's asking. You went a little bit further. You went above and beyond that.
Exactly. Giving each kid ownership, giving them an identity, making each kid feel important. I think that was one of his biggest hallmarks as a coach. Not only the young men whose lives he obviously impacted, the wins he had on Friday nights, but just the outpouring of young men to this day who still come up to me and said, "Doug, your dad, he really knew what was going on. I'm successful in life because of some of the things he taught me." And I think if you ask my dad, that would be what he's most proud of.
If anybody's coaching that played under and became a coach later, the details, because he would have a practice plan on the wall when you went out the door. You know what you're going to be doing that day. You were going from 3:45 to 3:50. Everything was broken down, and the sessions there wasn't any dead time. I mean, you knew it's kind of good in some ways going to practice. You knew where you're at before you got out there. You know what you're going to be doing.
Sure.
Sometimes you didn't like it, but you was going to come, and you knew if you got through that phase, there's some other good things coming up you're going to get to. Oklahoma drill coming up maybe down the road.
Oklahoma drill, county fair.
Oh man, the county fair. I read about that on the website.
I don't know if that still goes on, but that was a highlight.
You remember Wayne Butler, I'm sure, from around.
Certainly.
We saw Wayne Butler at a practice one day. He was about all these practice. He says, I was at a practice one time years ago, and this Doug Henderson had this county fair. I never seen anything like it. I remember something about that. Yeah.
County fair. I don't know if schools do that to this day or it's called something else, but just an end of practice kind of team building thing where each coach, each position coach, assistant on the staff has a station. You sprint from station to station on the whistle, do various drills, complete it with a lot of hustle, then you all come together at the end. It's just a good way to train, to get in shape, and also to come together as a team.
And you didn't do anything with Coach Henderson that you did halfway. You were supposed to do it 100% and do it correctly. I was just saying, do it correctly, because what's the use of doing it if you don't do it right? Learn to do it correctly. If you have to study it. You got to learn to do it and do it correctly.
Yeah, no wasted time. Each of you were helping us get better on Friday night, the ultimate goal of winning games, and on top of that, becoming better young men.
Kind of a little bit different than the Coach Hollifield philosophy. His philosophy always was do something even if it's wrong, which that was okay, I guess, at the time of Coach Hollifield's philosophy. Don't just stand there, do something. If you make a mistake, go ahead and follow through, the play, get involved in the play, be a part of the play, but don't just hold out and just sit there, what am I supposed to do?
Sure, mistakes can be corrected in practice. That's why it's practice. You use it to get better, and hopefully you learn from those mistakes. And I'm sure all the young men who played for my dad they'll agree with that.
No doubt about it. And sometimes his deal was too, the practice time is his time, and your time's the game time. His time, this is my time, and then come game time, that's your time to go out and enjoy and excel and show what you did and all that work.
But 100%, Andy. Yeah, the practice is the coach's time, the time to implement, to train, to coach, and coaches put the young men in position on Friday nights to make the plays, and it is all about the players on Friday.
Sure. He had some interesting thing about him. You'd work hard for him during the week. But when you got to the Thursday practice, I mean, that was like the most fun practice you could ever have, because on Thursdays, he would take you out to the game field. You only had a helmet and a pair of shorts on, and that was the day the lineman actually got to touch the ball. I mean, that's kind of strange, because you guys can touch the ball and throw it around a little bit and be involved in that, and pretty fun times back in this
Every
days.
Lineman's dream to touch the ball and to score, right? Yeah. Thursday, those are good memories. Going light, so to speak, like you say, no helmet, no just shorts,
and you knew
no
you were going to be out there a brief time, and it was going to be quick, and it was gone. But with him, you got your work done, and you went home. You came back the next day and went to hard work again.
Exactly. Yeah, the light practice on Thursday, the walkthrough. Hopefully, everything for that game week has been implemented. It's a chance to relax, to unwind a little bit on Thursday, focus on the game Friday night.
Now, you ended up at Page because of some different school districting. You started out with the young Page guys at Mendenhall, probably played youth football, those guys too. You were a Page man, but your brothers, they actually came over to Western Guilford, I guess, later on.
They did, and yes, we lived in the Page district growing up, so like you mentioned, I went to Mendenhall. All my friends were going there. I guess I just, went to Page. Certainly my father asked, would I want to go to Western to play? I said, I think I'm going to go play for Page. I mean, I know more people there, no disrespect. To his credit, he respected that. He understood it. I mean, decision certainly turned out best for everyone involved. My two brothers, as you mentioned, did go to Western. They played for him. A lot of great memories, a lot of wins for both Chuck and Rob on Friday nights.
Everybody, were all the Henderson brothers quarterbacks?
Well, I was growing up, yes, in youth ball and on JV, but certainly at Page during the time I went there.
You probably were with Stafford Moser and Todd Ellis.
Stafford Moser, Todd Ellis, Jeff Dunn. That triumvirate right there, that's a lot to overcome. So, I was a practice player, a scout team QB at times, but I moved to receiver on varsity. So I think I saw the writing on the wall there. But yes.
Even Stafford Moser saw the hand around the wall, because I guess he and Todd Ellis, they were like co-quarterbacks for a short period, and then they went full-time to Stafford and receiver.
Exactly. Stafford was a great contributor at receiver and defensive back, and he parlayed that to a scholarship to Wake Forest.
Smart young man. Did a great job. Todd Ellis, another outstanding young man. You did pretty well, too, because you made it to the Omega shoe business, and I guess going back to the Tom Rock days, back when Tom Rock was just a small pebble, now he's like a boulder,
Well, sure. Tom Rock and Phil Bowman, the two principal owners of Omega, opened it up in 1978, still coming to work every day, to this day, 6 years later.
That's some real success there. Now, your brothers at Western, they were quarterbacks?
They were quarterbacks, and my youngest brother Rob, a QB and a receiver, and my brother Chuck now is a head coach in his own right at Lexington High School. He's had head stops at Ledford, Ashboro, now Lexington. He lives in the Lexington community. He's a pillar down there, and he's following in the footsteps.
Yeah, I ran into him one day, maybe a night a couple of years back out at Northern Guilford, Ashboro. He was coaching at Ashboro then, and he came over to play the Nighthawks, and not a lot of success, but nobody had success against those guys. Got a guy like T.J. Logan back in the day. But and I was looking at him, I said, gosh, he does look a lot like Coach Henderson. And we were talking about, maybe talking about you or somebody else, about the photos of your dad, Coach Doug Henderson Sr., back when he first got into coaching. It was just kind of crazy how much similarity between, I guess, Chuck and your dad, how much they looked alike back in a younger day.
Well, yes, my brother Rob and I joke he's the clone. I mean, he was an education major at UNC just like my father. He went into head football coaching just like my dad did. They're very aligned philosophically, which is a good thing. I mean, a lot of the teachings that Chuck learned playing quarterback for my dad throughout his junior, senior year, no doubt he's taken that to the teams he coaches today.
And all the way through, your brothers, yourself, and everybody that played for your dad or even came in contact with your dad, I mean, I think even the student body, if they were able to absorb it like they should have, because he was offering that up to just anybody who would be willing to listen or follow, because he had kind of a controlling nature about him. But I mean, he was ready to lead, and everybody around him was taught to excel.
Well, sure. It's funny you mentioned that, Andy. He would sometimes get on the PA system and do the afternoon announcement announcements, and whether you were one of his players or just a run-of-the-mill student at Western, I heard people say it was like the voice of God coming over, and your spine stiffened up in your seat real quick, and you pretty much towed the line and did what Coach Henderson said, whether you were a player or not.
I know one day I told someone, talking about Coach Henderson a while back, I remember one day he took over a basketball practice. I think Coach Jones had to be out that day to take care of some other duties, whatever. But he came in and took that basketball practice. And those players went, man, we could get this guy in here every day. I mean, because this way he runs a practice. I mean, I told the person I talked about too, I said it was kind of the same way. Football, track, basketball, baseball, they're all done the same way. If you set up your system and orchestrate it the way it's supposed to be done, all these are run the same way. They're just different sports. Sometimes they're different people, and many times they're the same people.
Well, true. My dad, I don't know if you knew this or not, but coming out of Carolina as a 22-year-old man in 1959 upon graduation, his first head coaching job was at Guilford High School down in Brunswick County, and he coached all three main sports, basketball, football, and baseball. I mean, different times, obviously.
Sure,
I don't know if anyone could do that today.
I think C.K. Seiler did it from what I heard.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know how he did it.
No kidding.
I don't know how he did that at Sumner, I think, back in the day. I don't know how anybody could do that, but gosh, I mean, your dad running all those, he could run about anything, I'm sure.
Well, right, and the knowing about just the fundamentals, the basics in those sports, using his philosophy, his guidelines at that basketball practice you mentioned. I mean, he knew enough about the game to coach it, but he also brought the discipline to it to make those boys want to excel.
While he was doing the football, doing the track in between, like they say, he was doing. I don't know what it was about high school. It's different today. Today, you know who the athletic director is because it's a steady position. Plus, today you can only be AD. You can't be a coach in Guilford County. But back in the day, I don't think sometimes you even knew who the athletic director was. That position kind of went unnoticed because they were just so busy doing other things. They kind of did that on the side along with the other work they were doing already.
Well, yes, he wore three hats. As you mentioned, he was head football coach. Obviously, that demands tons of time. Track's the same way, especially the way he coached it. Each event was important, and he was the athletic director too. So working with budgets, making schedules for all the sports, coordinating with coaches. Certainly a busy man back in those days.
Practice times had to be tough too, keeping all those teams happy because that's not an easy job. When you got a boys basketball team, a girls basketball team, you got JV, you got varsity, you got ninth grade, trying to work all those at the same time too. The head coach sometimes in basketball is the person people look to, but the AD's got to make sure everybody's schedule is set up and it works coherently, I guess you could say.
Well, yes, I don't know how he did it. My hat's off to him. I mean, that he had his hand in a lot of things at Western. I mean, he was obviously in control. He's the name most synonymous with the Western.
What do you think the strongest quality was about him? I know he had a lot of different strong qualities about him. And I mean, what would you say? Is there one that stands out more than others? That one quality that kind of just kept him going, kept him driving, kept him pushing?
Well, just the need to bring discipline to doing things the right way. One of his great sayings, it never costs anything extra to go first class unless you're flying an airplane.
I read that something too about the article that came out from Jason Stewart, Mr. Schofield, Aaron Stewart. They talked about he wanted his teams to go first class. Even a kid who didn't have a chance to be a superstar, this kid was going to wear the same good-looking uniform the other guy was.
Exactly. Dress the part, you'll start to feel the part.
Interesting too. He bring up a lot of things to bring back memories. What he would make players do, I remember because I was around it somewhat myself. But you take the shoes home on Thursday night, you bring the shoes back polished for the game on Friday. You take that. This day, I don't think anybody would take the helmet home because it wouldn't come back. They probably sell it that night. I mean,
those are conditioned.
You take the helmet home, you get lemon pledge, you polish the helmet.
No, right. Stuff. Just giving each man, getting them to have pride in the way they look. You take the ownership to look good. Hopefully that'll translate into the field of play on Friday.
I don't know if you got these today. I even had these shirts like these, which you had the Western Guilford football helmet on it. You had your own team shirt you wore the day of the game.
Right. In lieu of jerseys. I mean, he might. That's a high school staple. A stereotype. You always see the football players wearing the jerseys on game day. But you're right, Andy. I think he wanted to go a little classier than that. Nice piqué button-up polos.
Probably one of the first guys too to go with the you eat the meal at the school for the away game. So many guys would go home and sometimes you get back on time. You hope you got back on time, but the away game, you had a meal prepared after school before you hit the bus.
Yes, team meal. The Booster Club was great about doing that. Like you mentioned, he didn't want anyone to get lost, get in a wreck, fall asleep, not show up. So he wanted everyone there thinking about the event at hand in a couple of hours, and that was the best way to do it. Plus, there's a team building aspect too. Being together
and spending more time together prior to the game. And some people splitting up, kind of becoming splinter, going all different directions. This kid he walks on what? He's not back. Wait wait a minute, we got to get out of here. This kid's not back yet. Plus, he had the food after the game too, which most teams didn't have that back in the day. They weren't ready for that yet. He would have the booster club. You get yourself a bit of food after the game as well before you head away from the away visiting site. I mean, it was set up out there by the bus or somewhere. You had some sandwiches and stuff.
Right.
That was a good deal.
And yes, and oftentimes we'd come back to the cafeteria at Western Guilford, and that would be waiting for us. So I'm sure all those young men appreciated that. That was a little touch that no doubt went a long way.
And the other things too, I told people about the fact he would have during you get your first week of practice, conditioning week. He would come back the first full gear week and have like a team session where you slept at the school, you stayed overnight. And I told him he had 4 practices a day.
Well, yes, 2 a days. There's like you mentioned the first 6 days, the conditioning, and then after 6 days of conditioning, you can go heavy or wear pads.
Yeah, you had the first heavy practice more than 7:30. You come back with another practice about 11:30, which was light. Couldn't do the heavy practice again.
Of course, no.
Then you come back again that afternoon about 5:30 with heavy practice, and come back again that night with about a 7:45 practice. He got a lot done.
Well, sure, a lot done, and yes, the boys were there at school, eating, sleeping in the gym. So there couldn't be anyone going AWOL.
Tell you what, he got the most out of what he had to work with. He was, like you say, wasn't a big man, smaller man, but a lot of energy. And again, he kind of frowned upon people who wouldn't do things his way, which he felt like was the right way. And he was determined that was going to be the way, and he had success with that way, and he stuck to it.
He did, tough as nails, commanded respect, spoke very authoritatively. When he talked, people listened. Spine straightened, as I alluded to earlier. I mean, he commanded respect from everyone he dealt with, from fellow coaches who tell me that, down to players, down to students in his physical education classes.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting too. Remember those classes? I think a lot of people love to get that advanced PE class.
Right.
Last class of the day. Line that baby up.
Advanced fitness, lifting weights. A lot of young men owe their high school bodies to that.
I would say a lot of kids owe their bodies, like you said, to work he did. I had a friend of mine back in the day. The guy came into school, I guess, on that team at about 125 pounds. He got a starting position. He might have weighed maybe 140 by the time he got out, but he was just a hard-nosed player. He would take those small guys, and for some reason he liked the smaller guys sometimes. I remember a picture one time I saw in a paper. We had a game and blocking up field. Look at the picture, and then I see the running back behind you going, "Wait, what's wrong? The little guys up here, the big running backs back here." But he knew those smaller guys could get off the line quick and get the people down the field, and the big guy would follow suit. And maybe since he was bigger, instead of getting maybe the 6, 10, 11, 12 yards, the guy might get 15 or 20.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, Andy. You look back at those rosters and the programs, from the late 70s, early 80s during his heyday, and you'd see a lineman 165 pounds. Now, what kind of holes can this guy clear?
Right.
But darned if he didn't do it.
Tell you what, quick snap count. Those guys were small off the ball quick, and like I said, those big linemen coming behind those guys. I mean, a lot of success. I mean, I guess he probably averaged maybe 7 or 8 wins a year over the course of his career.
In a 10-game schedule back then, exactly. And he coached, Andy, in an era where you could be 8-2, tied for first in your conference, the old Triad 3A, and a coin flip would determine if you went to the playoffs or not. I mean, that's just, how'd you like your season to rest on that? Now, I look these days at the NCHSA pairings, you'll see a team 4 and 6 in the playoff brackets. How did we get to that?
I tell you, it's interesting you think about that because, I mean, like you say, those teams were so good. I remember a couple of times, like, he was in the same conference with Ragsdale. He would finish second to Ragsdale. Ragsdale would go out and win the whole deal. The whole you got Dick Kemp's teams. They would go out and they would win the whole title, and you finish second to them in the conference. They didn't get a chance to go to the playoffs.
That Triad 3A conference was murder back then. I mean, like you say, Ragsdale, Moorhead always fielded good teams. Southeast Guilford always competitive.
Yeah.
Eastern Guilford had some great teams. Some great players back in the late 70s, early 80s. Northwest could sneak up on you every now and then. Northeast always had a great
Northeast
program.
was good till they split up Eastern Guilford. Then Northeast gradually in time got better and better.
Right.
But I talked to Coach Bill Slayton a couple of days back, and he said that Doug Henderson Jr., good kid, worked hard, did a good job, and he knew about that conference because he was on the same end of the father was for many years trying to get that playoff spot but couldn't get one. Nothing to be had.
You're right, Andy. Like you mentioned, Coach Slayton has reached out to me. He would come into Omega years later and just say what a phenomenal man and coach he thought my father was, and that was very nice of Coach Slayton to make those feelings known. I felt very humbled to hear that.
If you sat down with that guy today, you'd be shocked because he's like 83 years old. He still works out at the fitness center, I think about 5 days a week.
Still probably looks the same, doesn't he?
Not much different. He told me today, he said, I got a new program I'm working now. It's double the work I was doing before. I've increased my work double the weights. And I said, man, this guy does it.
Well, if anyone can do it, Coach Slayton can. You're right.
He was tough. The changes as time went on, the changes that happened within the school. Your dad, I guess, was here 30 years. Then he decides to move on after time was done. Do you think it was a peaceful ending, or maybe was it, how was the close as he closes things out as a coach? I know he saw things when he was, you mentioned that Charlotte down at, was East Bladen down that way back in the day.
Stop, yes.
And he saw how things, he came to Western Guilford, that kind of became his stop, his spot, and he saw how things had changed over the years. Was it tough, you think, closing it out, or was it maybe a peaceful ending?
I think it was very peaceful, Andy. I mean, my father reached the pinnacle of his profession, no doubt. I mean, he started at Western Guilford in the fall of '72, worked through the '88-'89 school year when he had his 30 years in with the North Carolina Public Schools, you know, certainly to the point he could collect his pension. I think at that point he had done all he felt he could do, and he wanted to turn over the program in good standing to Coach Charlie Griffin, who had another successful run as well.
They were lucky to get that guy. I met that guy a couple of years after he came in. He was well-rounded, good guy, good to get along with, good personality. He seemed like he was a good fit for the program after Coach Henderson stepped down.
Yes, Coach Griffin had some collegiate experience, coached at some, I think, Salisbury State in Maryland. I think I remember that. And you're right, Coach Griffin, great guy, real fun.
He was looking to get that Anthony Saunders kid, too.
Yeah, you can win some games with a guy with 7,000 career yards in your backfield, can't you?
How many touchdowns? Probably 100 whatever touchdowns. He was like,
they still have records. I
right
don't know.
In there with T.A. McClendon, the guy out of Albemarle. They both had those records close to it for years. Just amazing what they were to do. And Coach Henderson was blessed, too, because he had a lot of talent, too, come through there. That championship team of guys like Aaron Stewart and Glenn Morris, and a guy told me to mention Rufus Webster, the Rowland brothers. I mean, the names going on.
Neil and Lewis, Junior Jeffers. I mean, just a who's who of black hats from that glory era. He coached some good young men, and those men will tell you that he got everything possible out of them.
I know Aaron Stewart feels like, and always has talked about, he owes a lot to Coach Henderson, what he was able to do, because I think Aaron in the beginning was kind of like a running back, and Coach Henderson smart enough to shift into quarterback after his other quarterbacks graduated. You know, you get that position, it's your time to take over. And I think they lost, what I read from the article, it was done, they lost the first 2 games that year.
They ran the tables 12 in a row. I think maybe Page and Ragsdale, if memory serves, were the first 2 games.
Like that
maybe not. I don't know. But that stands to reason. But you're right. Yeah, 12 wins after that. Just ran roughshod through the Triad 3A those last 8 games, and then the 4 playoff games, culminating in the state championship against South Caldwell.
A lot of respect, I'm sure, I know there is, between Coach Henderson and Coach Marion Kirby. Those guys have been in contact and known each other going all the way back when Coach Kirby first came to town, I'm sure. I don't know who got here first. They got here about the same time.
They're saying my father was 72. Coach Kirby's first year from Edenton was 73.
Right about the same time.
So you're right. Right about the same time.
And they both, I guess, had coached down east before they got here?
They had. Yeah, my dad in the southeast, Coach Kirby more in the Tidewater region, going into the northeast part of the state. But yes, they were coaching cohorts. They played every season. Page, obviously a 4A school, bigger, certainly more athletes to draw from, but my father was always competitive against him, and Coach Kirby will tell you that he is the most organized man, Coach Henderson, that he ever coached against.
I would say.
You always knew his teams were going to be ready to play.
I remember there was a time when maybe things got a little bit out of sorts, out of sorts in the sideline, because people were supposed to be in the game. You're trying to find a guy, where's this guy get in there? It didn't happen often with Coach Henderson. If it did, you didn't get in the game again later. But he came up with actually a seating chart. You sit at this spot on the bench, and you better be there. If you get out of that spot, I find you not in that spot, you don't have a spot.
You never know when your name or number is going to be called. That's what he instilled in each of his players, and more often than not, he was right. There were critical junctures in the game where that young man was needed, and from Coach Henderson's teachings, he was ready to perform.
Going back over the years, how would you sum it all up from what you saw? Because you had the bird's eye view. You were the oldest son. You were right there with it, watching your dad around the championship and around the Western Guilford days, Western Guilford. How would you sum all that up?
Just a lifetime spent, incredible dedication, instilling discipline in young men, teaching them to do things the right way. No task is unimportant. Giving each kid ownership, working together for a common goal. We want to win games, of course, but I want you to to become fine young men and contributing members of society once you leave this place.
Kind of give us an idea what's going to happen on Friday night at Western when they dedicate the stadium.
All right, well, from what I understand, Andy, you know, this whole groundswell, just an outpouring of respect, admiration for my father. I mean, I can't speak on this accurately, but from what I hear, the scuttlebutt around, it will be the most attended event in Western history. Now, you know, I told my dad that. He was joking, what about the 77 championship?
That's my first thought came to mind, too, yeah.
So I guess we'll see how that turns out tomorrow night. But from what I've heard, you know, the people I've talked to, you know, they tell two friends, so on, so on. The email chain, social media has blown up with this. It should be pretty fairly attended tomorrow night.
I'm
eager
so.
to see how that works out.
And they'll do it at halftime, the recognition?
Correct. They'll do it at halftime. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention David Griffin Jr. of D.H. Griffin, several influential members of the Western community, David Page, Art Schoolfield, Jimmy Duncan, I'm sure I'm leaving out several, Rick Mooney, got together, and through D.H. Griffin, the construction division, that created like an archway, a brick and metal sign that'll be unveiled tomorrow night.
Will that go out in front where you walk into the stadium?
Yes, out in front of the gate where you walk in.
Gotcha.
So there may be a plaque in the stadium. I don't know what the future plans are, but from what I'm hearing, tomorrow night is the permanent spot for the unveiling of this archway that you walk through to get into the stadium. And it'll have his name
really
on
nice,
it.
yeah.
Should be. I'm excited to see that.
And I guess Coach Henderson will be able to be there. He'll be on the field at halftime. And
he'll be honored at halftime. He'll have front row seats for the festivities tomorrow night, and all of our family will be there. Several of his former players and coaches. I'm really interested to see who all turns out.
Exactly. Should be a huge night. Looking forward to it. And I know he can't guarantee a win, but if those players allow some of that to rub off on them, they're missing out on a great opportunity.
Well, sure. Obviously, he wants the Black Hats to win every game, but hopefully the young men play a good game tomorrow night against Southwest Guilford.
Of those coaches that worked for your dad, who are some of those names you remember the most? Because you're around some of those coaching staffs, too.
Gosh,
Without leaving anybody out, just throw some quick ones out there.
Wonderful childhood spent. All the men I was fortunate to meet who worked with my dad, everyone from John Brooks, Bill Hollifield, John Smith, Art Schoolfield, Daniel Barrow. I mean, I'm sure I'm leaving out several. DePaul Mittman, of course, Charlie Griffin, Eddie Flincham, just a who's who of coaches.
Some
Casey Jones, Brett Stell. I mean, it's embarrassing, and I don't want anyone listening to feel left out.
You brought some already. I hadn't thought about in a while.
Yeah,
some very good names you bring up there. John Brooks was, man, you talk about a tough coach. That guy was not only tough as far as being a hard-nosed coach, but he was just a tough individual. Another guy that did things the right way.
Yeah, my brother Chuck will tell you a funny story on one of the Western Guilford Booster Club beach trips when we were little. I mean, Chuck might have been 2, 3 years old. Coach Brooks ran over him at the beach, and he bore the full brunt of that. And I think they just took him to the hospital down at Myrtle Beach to get checked out. But everything obviously was okay. But he can tell you Coach Brooks was tough. He packed a wallop.
Man, that's interesting. Well, listen, a lot of good memories.
Thank you,
Thanks
Andy.
for being with us. And we've got all this recorded, going to be able to play it back and also catch the video of it at YouTube later on as well, courtesy of our good man Don Moore. Always good to talk about Coach Henderson, a big impact. I think you guys went to church at that church up above the school there, right?
Faith Presbyterian Church on West Friendly, right before the turnoff.
You guys were right into that community, deep into it.
He's a pillar, no doubt.
West Jefferson Road, you guys lived at Jefferson Road?
Jefferson Gardens and Jefferson Road, sure enough, right off Friendly. So, yeah, all self-contained right there. They're all near the Western Guilford. You know, everyone knew where to find him.
I bet when he came in, just one final thought or two to close it out. We're going to get our Western Guilford players in here, but I bet when he came there, because I think that stadium was complete when he got there, right?
No, well, it was not. There was a fundraising effort throughout several people to build that stadium, and under his tutelage, you know, the first few years while he taught and coached at Western, that stadium got built because of a massive community effort.
I think it was a big effort to get that put together.
He spearheaded. Like he had a vision, what he wanted his team to play in. I mean, he always had the best field of anybody. I mean, just the time he put into manicuring that playing surface. You didn't see that dedication elsewhere.
I think you had like a sprinkler system in it back in those early days.
Had a sprinkler system, top of the line Kubota tractor that he loaded with. A lot of painstaking efforts in lining and painting the field. He did it right.
Yeah, I think some of maybe Guilford College might have played a game or two there if they had a big game. And I remember they had a team called the Greensboro Redskins, a semi-pro team that played a few games there back in the day as well.
Yeah, probably the best facility
days.
around.
Plus they had that Holland scoreboard, the Holland Automotive scoreboard.
Sure enough.
Always was there as well. Yeah. Well, I got to let
All
you go.
right. Thank you so much, Andy. I appreciate
And
it.
onward with Omega Sports. So I will say this: I've got my good friends at Graham Sporting Goods working with the website, but the Omega Sports shoes haven't used these.
Adrenaline's Brooks.
Yeah.
You need anything? Let me know.
The Brooks, I'm in all the time. I've got a pair at home right now. I'm pretty much wore out in 3 months, but I got to keep them moving.
Well, if you need anything, Andy, let me know.
You got it.
I'll certainly make the price
Thanks for
better
everything.
you. Thank you.
We'll
I
see
really
you out that way
appreciate
tomorrow
all
night.
your efforts in making this happen.
And he does look a lot like Coach Henderson, right? Doug Henderson Jr. looks a lot like the coach, even talks like the coach in some ways.
Well, thank you. Yeah, my brother's even worse.
You got it. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir.